Prue. How are you?
Rachel, I'm fine. And you?
I'm doing great. To start, I'm sure you've got this question asked you before, but how has the audiences between both shows, between the Great British Bake Off versus the Great American Bake Off, reacted differently? Have you noticed anyone like different reactions between the two?
When I first joined Bake Off, the baking show, the Great American Baking Show, when I first joined the Great American Baking Show, I was rather nervous that the American contestants might be like American contestants I've seen on other television competitive shows, which are pretty horrifying. They tend to diss each other, to sabotage each other, to push the try to push themselves into the limelight, to hog the camera. They want to act up and be famous, and it's all quite unattractive. And that's not at all how the Brits behave. And I thought, oh, I don't think I want to do this. But I hadn't watched any of the Great American Baking Show, and I didn't realize that what's obviously happened is that the American, first of all, bakers are nice people, so they tend to not be, um, horrible. And secondly, I think they must have all been watching the Great British Bake Off for years, because that's what would have made them want to join in the first place. And they'd absorbed the vibe and they know how to behave. And so I was delighted to see that they were just, you know, um, they understood what Bake Off is about. And the Great American Baking Show is very similar. I mean, there are differences. The Americans tend to be a little more open about their emotions. They're not quite so lipped, and they're not quite so reserved. Um, they're more forthright and open. They have a much sweeter tooth than the Brits, so they like a lot of sugar in their cakes, which I find too much generally. And they like really big things. If it's going to put icing on it, let's have lots. So they put in a good inch of butter icing on top of it. Too much. But by and large, the skills are the same. The ability, Paul would actually say, in fact, he said this morning that he thought that this year the Great American bakers had been actually better than the Brits. I thought that was going too far, really. I think level pegging. I don't want to say that the Americans are better than the Brits, but they're certainly up there, which they weren't 2 years ago.
That's
I don't know
exciting.
what that is. Maybe that's because they've been practicing, during lockdown, everybody baked far more, and that made more people apply for Bake Off. So we had a bigger pool to choose the best from. But I definitely think we've got amazing bakers this year. You'll be delighted. They really are astonishing.
Yeah, and I think, one of the joys of Bake Off for me as a comedy nerd is to see comedians kind of working with the judges and like I don't want to say messing with the contestants, but especially on Bake Off, Noel is always in someone's nonsense when they're trying to bake. But the comedians are such a big part of the show because otherwise we're watching bakers just bake and there's not really a back and forth. What for you has been the fun of getting to work with like Zach and everyone here and really understand how American comedians differ from British comedians in that aspect of the show?
It's very, it's different for me because of course, I don't know what Zach and Casey do. I mean, I know the comedians, but I haven't seen their shows. So I don't pick up on what quite often makes the contestants laugh because they recognize it from their shows, which I don't necessarily see. But don't forget, I don't see, Paul and I are not allowed in the tent while they're baking because we're not allowed to prejudice out. We have to come to the bakes clean without really knowing anything about how it happened. But I do think that just talking to those two and knowing Noel and Alison so well, I think the difference is that the British sense of humor is a bit more weird. It's a bit more. Um, it just it's just funny even when you don't understand it, and you're expected to follow along whether you understand it or not.
Mhm.
Whereas the American sense of humor is more obvious and more, I can get the jokes more easily because they're not quite so weird. I mean, after half the time, I have no idea what Noel Fielding's talking about, but it still makes you laugh because he's crazy. I mean, the guy's mad to begin with, isn't he?
Yeah, he was old Greg. But you should watch Casey and Happy Endings. I think you would enjoy that show. It's very good and she's very good in it. But I love, and I know it was a lot of comfort to Americans watching Bake Off, and now we have our own version, which it's very funny watching Americans kind of be like, well, that's not the show I signed up for. I want to see a bunch of British people baking. I don't want to see Americans doing it. But what has been the most surprising thing about this experience and like doing the American version of this show and learning kind of how we approach things? I know you said there's a lot more sugar and a lot more everything on our stuff, but was there anything that you were like, that's actually pretty smart? We don't do that.
Well, I think the things that surprised me, for example, when I saw that we were having an episode which was about making pizza, I thought that's ridiculous. Nobody makes pizza. Pizza is something you can buy on the corner.
Yeah.
And even Americans don't make pizza. But however, it was remarkable because they made amazing pizzas, and it was just lovely, and so that surprised me, and it was good fun. The other thing that didn't surprise me so much, but I was not too keen on, is that we had pretzels, which are very good American. You know, we were trying to be a little bit more American this year, so we tried a bit harder to give the public things that they felt were truly American. And I hate pretzels. I really think they're an abomination. Oh, good.
I don't like pretzels.
I think they're an abomination. I don't see what's the point in them. However, what surprised me was that I found myself eating reluctantly, but eating pretzels and realizing that they really are a skilled thing and that you can have good pretzels and bad pretzels and sweet ones and sour, savory ones. So I learned a bit about pretzels.
You can stuff them with stuff, and then that's good. I will say, Americans surprisingly got into making our own pizzas. Everyone has like a pizza stone now, because I think that was a lockdown thing. Is everyone thinks they can make pizzas? My mom does it. Everyone's really into it here, so it makes sense to have a pizza episode for Americans because
knock one out in a minute then.
Make a pizza real quick. For my last question, I do think, I like that the show is expanding and we're seeing both an American one and a British one. Did it help you though coming to this and still having Paul at your side, so it wasn't a completely like fish out of water situation where you were the one person from Bake Off heading to an American version?
Yes, no, I was, and I'd never done an American television show either. So I was very glad that Paul was there. And he's a good guy, Paul. We quite often disagree and but it's always jokey and it's always fine. But when I very first applied for the Bake Off job, I had my hat in the ring for the judging job for the British Bake Off.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon it was Paul who got me the job because I had to audition for it, and we did half of an audition. And when we'd got through half of it, we were judging something like scones or something. And Paul started, and in his way, he just perfectly analyzed the bake. Said the crust is this, the middle is that. He went through the whole thing, and I thought, well, that's perfect. And so I said, well, I agree. Absolutely. And then he said to me, Prue, he said, if you want this job, don't just agree with me. You better say it yourself. Even if you have to repeat what I say, you've got to get in there and make yourself felt. Otherwise, what's the point of you? So I tried harder in the next half of the audition and I got the job. But so I think I owe it to Paul. And he's always been, it's been really nice to have him around.
Yeah, I'm so excited for people to get to see this season of American Baking Show. And thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.